In every culture, in every age, humanity has asked the same question. Where do we come from and what came before us? The story of Adam, found in the sacred pages of Genesis, has for millennia stood as the beginning of mankind's tale. To countless generations, Adam was the first man, the father of all who walk the earth. Yet behind this story lingers a deeper mystery, one that has unsettled theologians, mystics, and seekers of truth alike. For if Adam was the beginning, then what are we to make of the shadows that lie before his time? What existed in the silence before his breath filled the dust with life? Was there a world before Adam, a history long buried beneath layers of scripture, myth, and forgotten memory? The book of Genesis opens with the majesty of creation, light separating from darkness, waters divided from sky, earth blossoming with life, and at last the forming of man from the dust. But even as this story unfolds, it carries with it unanswered questions. Why is the earth described as formless and void before God, His ordering hand moved upon it? What had rendered it desolate before creation's song began anew? The text offers no direct answer, only silence. And in that silence, centuries of speculation have taken root. Some claim that Adam was not the first being to walk upon this world, but the first of a chosen kind, a new beginning after an age already lost. They speak of civilizations erased by fire and flood, of beings who came before the sons of men, of wars in heaven that scarred not only the skies, but the earth beneath. In this view, Adam's arrival was not the dawn of existence, but a rebirth, a restoration after something far older had fallen into ruin. Throughout history, whispers of this hidden truth have surfaced in every corner of human thought. Jewish mystics spoke of worlds created and destroyed before this one, cycles of existence wiped away before Adam was fashioned. Early Christian writers hinted at mysteries they dared not name, and Islamic tradition spoke of jinn who ruled the earth long before the first man was formed. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Sumerian tablets to the walls of forgotten temples, echoes of beings and kingdoms before humanity can be found. It is as though the story of Adam was not a beginning in the absolute sense, but the beginning of us, our kind, our story, our chapter in a much longer saga. And the question that haunts us is this: who or what turned those earlier pages? What knowledge has been hidden, suppressed, or lost that might reveal the forgotten history of humanity? To search for what existed before Adam is not merely to ask about ancient civilizations or theological puzzles. It is to stare into the void that lies before the known, into the abyss of forgotten ages where myth and history blur together. It is to confront the possibility that humanity's story is far older, stranger, and more mysterious than we have been told. And it is to recognize that beneath the familiar tale of Eden may lie the ruins of a deeper truth, a truth that challenges what it means to be human, to be chosen, and to begin. The journey into this mystery will take us from scripture to myth, from the stars to the earth's deepest ruins, from angels to ancient kings, from the silence before Genesis to the echoes that still resonate today. For the question remains, haunting and eternal: what existed before Adam? The story of Adam begins in Genesis, yet its power lies not only in what it says, but also in what it leaves unsaid. In the opening verses, the earth is described as formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. These words have stirred wonder for centuries. Why would the earth, fresh from the hand of the Creator, already lie in desolation and chaos before light was called forth? Some traditions have taken this silence as an invitation, a hidden doorway into mysteries long obscured. For within this single verse lies the possibility of ages lost. The Hebrew phrase tohu vabohu, formless and void, carries the weight of destruction, as though something once was, only to be unraveled. Some scholars have asked if Genesis does not describe the beginning of creation itself, but rather a reordering after a cataclysm that left the world in ruins. Could the 6 days of creation have been a restoration, not an absolute origin? If so, then Adam's story begins not at the dawn of all things, but at the dawn of a renewed order, one that rose upon the ashes of a forgotten past. Theologians of old wrestled with these questions. St. Augustine pondered whether other ages or beings might have preceded Adam. The Jewish Midrash spoke of entire worlds created and destroyed before this one, each a failed attempt before the final enduring world in which Adam was placed. In later centuries, some Christian thinkers gave voice to the gap theory, imagining vast eons between the first verse of Genesis and the second, a gulf of time where angels fell, kingdoms crumbled, and the earth became desolate, awaiting its rebirth. The silence of Genesis became a canvas upon which imagination painted pictures of cosmic war and forgotten civilizations. For where scripture is silent, myth often speaks, filling the void with fragments of memory and whispers of ancient truth. And across cultures, this silence seemed to echo with the same suggestion, that Adam's story was not the first, only the first remembered. If the world was reborn in the days of Adam, then what perished before? Some claimed it was the angelic rebellion, Lucifer's fall from heaven, that brought chaos to earth. Others believed it was an earlier humanity, judged and destroyed for sins that paralleled those of Noah's flood. In Islamic tradition, the earth was not empty, but inhabited by the jinn, creatures of smokeless fire, who ruled and warred long before Adam was given dominion. And in ancient Mesopotamian epics, kings and sages ruled in the depths of time, their reign stretching back into the shadows before the flood. Genesis, in its majestic simplicity, offers only a silence where others would write volumes. Perhaps this silence is deliberate, a mystery too great for direct revelation. Or perhaps it is a silence that invites the seeker, the dreamer, the restless spirit of humanity, to look beyond the words and ask, what was erased? What was forgotten? What still lingers in the dust of time? It is in this silence that the story of Adam begins. And it is in this silence that the whispers of a pre-Adamic world continue to haunt us. For the question is not only who Adam was, but what Adam was not. The heir of an unknown legacy, the child of a new dawn rising over an ancient night. From here, the path leads us deeper into speculation, into rebellion, into beings who defied the order of heaven and reshaped the earth long before Adam walked its gardens. If Adam's story was the dawn of a new creation, then what of the darkness that came before? To many interpreters, the silence in Genesis was not emptiness but memory, the faint echo of a world destroyed. Here lies the foundation of what would come to be known as the gap theory, a belief that between the first verse of Genesis and the second lies an unspoken gulf of ages. In that span, entire histories may have risen and fallen, leaving the earth a wasteland until it was clothed again in light. Some envisioned these ages as worlds filled with life, perhaps earlier creations of humanity, or beings unlike us, wiped away in judgment. The earth, once vibrant, may have been plunged into ruin, its waters covering all, its skies darkened, until only chaos remained. To those who embrace this view, the phrase formless and void is not the description of an untouched beginning, but the aftermath of cosmic catastrophe. Adam, then, was not placed in a newborn paradise, but in a renewed world, scarred by the shadows of what had come before. In the Hebrew scriptures, hints of such forgotten ages appear like fragments of a shattered mirror. The prophet Isaiah speaks of the earth being without form and void in the context of judgment, as though creation's chaos echoes destruction. Jeremiah envisions a land consumed by desolation, where the heavens give no light, and every bird has fled. Could these visions be glimpses of an earlier collapse long before Adam drew breath? Even within Christian tradition, voices arose to suggest such a possibility. Thomas Chalmers, a theologian of the 19th century, famously spoke of eons hidden in the Bible's opening lines, where prehistoric ages might be reconciled with Scripture's silence. But centuries before him, mystics and sages had already imagined worlds destroyed before Adam's world was born. The rabbis of old whispered that God had fashioned an unmade universes before settling upon this one, a cycle of creation and judgment stretching into eternity. In Islamic lore, the shadow of pre-Adamic ages takes a more vivid shape. The jinn, beings of fire, are said to have ruled the earth long before man, building kingdoms, waging wars, and spreading corruption. It was only after their rebellion that Adam was created, a new steward of the earth, tasked with a responsibility the jinn had forsaken. In this telling, Adam's story is not isolated, but the latest in a chain of cosmic experiments, each tested and judged in turn. And beyond scripture, in the myths of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Sumer, there are whispers of kings whose reigns stretched back tens of thousands of years before the flood. Their names are inscribed in clay, their deeds sung in epic, yet their very scale places them outside the ordinary span of human history. Were these rulers myth, or were they memories of an age before Adam's kind? The shadow of the pre-Adamic world looms not as a single story, but as a tapestry of echoes, scattered across traditions, bound by the same haunting idea, that Adam was not the first, only the first remembered the air of a renewed creation rising upon ruins too ancient to recall. But what was it that brought such an age to its end? The silence in Genesis may hold not only the memory of forgotten civilizations, but the scars of a greater war, one not of men but of angels. A rebellion whose consequences may have shaken heaven itself and cast the earth into ruin. Long before Adam walked the gardens of Eden, some say the heavens themselves were unsettled. Among the radiant hosts of angels, there arose a figure of extraordinary beauty and power, one whose pride would change the cosmos forever. He is known as Lucifer, the morning star, the light-bearer who sought dominion not by divine mandate but by his own ambition. His rebellion was not an isolated act. It was a shattering of order, a rupture in the balance of creation, and some traditions suggest its echoes reached far beyond the celestial realm, touching the earth itself. Legends hold that before Adam, the earth was already inhabited, not by mankind but by beings of remarkable strength, intelligence, and mystery. Perhaps these were the jinn of Islamic tradition, or the pre-Adamic humans whispered of in ancient Jewish lore. Perhaps they were other creatures, half seen, half imagined, whose existence was intertwined with the will of angels. When rebellion erupted in heaven, some of these angels descended to the earth, drawn by ambition, by desire, or by the secrets hidden in the mortal realm. They became watchers, observers, teachers, and, inevitably, corrupters. The Book of Enoch preserves these haunting tales. It tells of angels who looked upon the daughters of men and took them as wives, producing offspring of immense size and power, the Nephilim. These beings were giants in every sense, terrifying and magnificent, straddling the line between the divine and the mortal. Their presence, it is said, brought violence and corruption, warping the earth and hastening the judgment that would leave the pre-Adamic world in ruin. Were they the remnants of an earlier humanity, or the hybrid children of a rebellion that spanned heaven and earth? The texts do not tell us definitively, only hinting at truths lost to time. In Islamic accounts, similar echoes of this rebellion appear. The jinn, powerful beings created from smokeless fire, once ruled the earth in a time before mankind. Some resisted Adam's arrival, some sought dominion, and some were cast down when God gave humans stewardship of the world. It is a story that resonates across cultures, a world already in motion, already inhabited, already scarred, into which Adam entered as a new hope, a fresh beginning after a devastating upheaval. Even in mythologies far from the Hebrew and Islamic traditions, we find traces of this same theme. In Sumer, the gods themselves are depicted as creating humankind to serve purposes abandoned by higher beings. In Egypt, legends speak of civilizations ruled by divine or semi-divine kings long before the dynasties recorded in history. Perhaps these myths are not just symbolic, but the memory of a time when the earth was alive with entities and powers now forgotten. The first rebels were more than prideful angels or disobedient spirits. They were the harbingers of change, the catalysts of destruction, and the shapers of what would become a new era. Their story reminds us that Adam did not arise in isolation. He entered a world marked by previous triumphs and failures, by rebellion and ruin, by lessons written not in scrolls but in the scars of the earth itself. To ponder the first rebels is to confront the reality that the world before Adam was not a blank slate. It was vibrant, dangerous, magnificent, and ultimately imperiled. And from its ashes, a new story would begin, one of man, of choice, of morality, and of hope. But before Adam, the shadows of that pre-Adamic world still lingered, whispering truths few dared to name. If the world before Adam was alive with rebellion and divine intrigue, it was also inhabited by beings whose stories have almost vanished from memory. Among the most enigmatic is Lilith, a figure whose name still trembles on the lips of mystics and scholars alike. In some Jewish traditions, Lilith was created as Adam's first companion, a woman of equal stature and spirit. Yet she refused to submit, claiming independence and sovereignty, and in her defiance, she vanished into the shadows. Some say she fled to the wilderness, gathering the spirits and creatures of the pre-Adamic world to her side. Others claim she became the mother of demons, her offspring wandering the earth long before Adam's children walked its soil. Lilith represents more than rebellion. She embodies the mystery of a pre-Adamic existence, a being who was fully alive, fully conscious, and fully autonomous before the dawn of recorded humanity. Her story is mirrored in other cultures, from Mesopotamian Lamassu and Lilu spirits to the female demons of ancient Babylon, hinting at an age when the line between the human and the divine was far more fluid. Yet Lilith was not alone. Mystical traditions speak of other pre-Adamic beings, angels who chose to dwell on earth, spirits of forgotten civilizations, and entities whose forms and intentions defy comprehension. Some were teachers, bringing knowledge of crafts, astronomy, and arts to those who would follow. Others were predators, bringing corruption and chaos wherever they roamed. Together, they populated a world that was not yet Adam's, a tapestry of life and consciousness erased from memory, save for the whispers left in scripture and myth. Islamic accounts add another layer, describing the jinn as both neighbors and adversaries to the earliest humans. Made of fire, invisible yet powerful, these beings predated mankind and wielded dominion over vast landscapes. Some fell into corruption, challenging God's will and necessitating the creation of Adam as the first of a new order, a steward who could navigate the delicate balance of morality and obedience that the jinn had failed to uphold. Even in the epics of Sumer and Babylon, we encounter similar beings, demigods, giants, and teachers of forbidden knowledge who inhabited the earth long before humanity's familiar story began. Their names are inscribed in clay, their deeds sung in epic verse. Yet their place in the chronology of history remains uncertain. Were they literal beings, remnants of a pre-Adamic race, or symbolic echoes of human understanding attempting to make sense of forces greater than themselves? What unites these forgotten beings is the sense of a world already full, already complex, and already alive with intelligence before Adam emerged. They hint at the possibility that the first man was not alone in his infancy, that the earth had been shaped by entities beyond comprehension, and that the story of humanity's birth is only one chapter in a far greater saga. To explore these beings is to peer into the hidden layers of history and myth, to see that before Adam, the earth was a stage for forces both magnificent and terrifying. And yet, for all their power and mystery, these pre-Adamic entities would be overshadowed by a new beginning, a man fashioned from dust, a child of promise and a hope that the failures of the past might not define the future. Even as scripture hints at shadows before Adam, the world itself seems to murmur of lost ages. Across the rivers of Mesopotamia, the sands of Egypt, and the fertile crescent of Sumer, civilizations rose with astonishing knowledge and grandeur, leaving monuments, tablets, and legends that speak of rulers and beings who predated the histories we recognize. These echoes, scattered across time, may be the faint traces of a world that existed before Adam, preserved in myth and memory. In Sumerian texts, kings are said to have reigned for tens of thousands of years, their names etched upon clay tablets as if to defy mortality itself. The Anunnaki, mysterious gods who walked among men, are described as teaching humans the arts of civilization, agriculture, writing, and the governance of cities. Some scholars suggest that these stories reflect distant memories of pre-Adamic beings, hybrids of divine and mortal, whose influence lingered long after their era ended. Egyptian myths tell of gods who governed the earth before the pharaohs, deities whose reign predates the earliest dynasties. They built temples, carved knowledge into stone, and instructed humanity in the mysteries of life, death, and the stars. Here too one finds the notion of an age before the familiar order, a civilization where beings of immense power walked the earth in ways that humans could only imitate. Even in Babylonian epics, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, we glimpse a fascination with longevity and divine human interaction. The heroes and kings of these tales often speak of great floods, of civilizations lost to divine wrath, of knowledge that came from beyond the human sphere. Could these be cultural memories of pre-Adamic worlds, of a time when the earth teemed with beings now erased from human memory? The recurrence of these themes across distant lands hints at a shared understanding that the world before Adam was not empty, not silent, and not ordinary. It was inhabited, alive with intelligence and ambition, and shaped by forces both magnificent and terrifying. Myths speak of giants who walked the earth, of semi-divine teachers, of cities whose splendor surpasses human imagination. These civilizations, whether literal or symbolic, suggest a prehistory far richer than the conventional narrative of creation allows. Some believe that the remnants of these civilizations persist, hidden beneath layers of earth, lost to flood and fire, their knowledge buried in stone and memory. Archaeological anomalies, massive structures whose origins challenge modern explanation, artifacts of advanced craftsmanship found in prehistoric strata, tantalize those who seek evidence of pre-Adamic histories. They whisper that the human story we know may be only the latest chapter, a continuation of events begun long before Adam's dust was stirred. To trace these echoes is to glimpse a world at once familiar and alien, a world of ambition, rebellion, and innovation, yet also of vulnerability and destruction. It reminds us that Adam's story, magnificent as it is, may have risen upon the ruins of prior ages, inheriting the lessons, failures, and mysteries of those who walked before him. And so, from scripture to myth to the fragments of human memory, the evidence of a pre-Adamic age emerges, not in certainty, but in suggestion, not in full clarity, but in shadowed outlines. It is a world both tantalizing and elusive, one whose secrets beckon the seeker, daring us to ask what truly existed before Adam, and what traces of that hidden past may still shape the world today. Among the most haunting whispers of a world before Adam are the tales of the giants, the Nephilim, and the Watchers, beings who blurred the line between mortal and divine. The Book of Enoch preserves their story with chilling clarity, describing angels who descended to the earth drawn by beauty, ambition, and curiosity. They took wives among human women, and from these unions were born creatures of immense size and power. These were not mere myths of exaggeration. In every telling, they are portrayed as forces that reshaped the earth, teaching forbidden knowledge, commanding armies, and defying the order of heaven itself. The Watchers, as Enoch calls them, were angels tasked with observing humanity. But in their fascination with the mortal world, they transgressed divine boundaries. They taught humanity secrets that were not meant to be shared: the arts of war, sorcery, astrology, metallurgy, knowledge that brought both advancement and corruption. Their offspring, the Nephilim, became giants whose might and ferocity terrified men and angels alike. Some texts suggest that their violence was so great that the earth itself groaned beneath their weight, and that their existence hastened a judgment that would cleanse the world of pre-Adamic corruption. These stories are not isolated to Hebrew scripture. In Mesopotamian epics, kings of extraordinary stature rule before the flood, their lifespans extending thousands of years. Their deeds and their downfall mirror the tales of the Nephilim, suggesting that humanity's collective memory preserved the echoes of an age when giants walked the earth. Even in the myths of the Americas and other distant lands, there are tales of colossal beings, the children of gods and mortals who once ruled the land, and whose traces are scattered in stone monuments, legends, and oral history. The Nephilim were more than a threat. They represented the consequences of cosmic transgression. They were a tangible manifestation of a pre-Adamic world, a warning etched in myth that the boundaries between heaven and earth, divine and human, cannot be crossed without consequence. Their story is a bridge, linking the world before Adam to the one that followed. It reminds us that the earth he inherited was already shaped by rebellion, by power, and by beings whose shadow still lingered in the world of men. In Islamic tradition, echoes of the Watchers can be found among the jinn, beings of fire who once ruled the earth, and whose interactions with humans could be both protective and destructive. Like the Nephilim, they were intermediaries between the divine and mortal realms, capable of great influence and capable of defiance. These legends collectively suggest a universe alive with complexity, far older and more intricate than the neat lines of Adam's Genesis narrative suggest. To contemplate the giants and the Watchers is to confront the extraordinary. A world before Adam teeming with power, knowledge, and beings whose existence defies ordinary understanding. It is to imagine a time when the rules of creation were tested, when rebellion and ambition left scars upon the earth, and when the stage was set for a new beginning. One in which Adam would step into a world already alive with memory, consequence, and the lingering echo of beings too magnificent to endure. The giants fell, the Watchers were bound, and the earth lay ready for a new chapter. Yet their memory survives, encoded in scripture, myth, and perhaps even in the stones and bones that modern explorers continue to unearth. In them, we glimpse a pre-Adamic history both terrifying and sublime, a history that reminds us that the first man inherited not a blank earth, but a world shaped by forces far greater than himself. Long before the stories of Adam, Lilith, and the Watchers were written, the earth itself bore witness to life in forms both familiar and strange. Modern science reveals a tapestry of existence stretching back hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. Fossils of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other hominids tell a story of beings who walked, hunted, and perhaps even thought in ways not unlike ourselves. They were not Adam, yet they were part of the Earth's living history, a prelude to humanity as we know it. The bones of these early humans speak of worlds already full of life, of societies, and of intelligence struggling to survive. Neanderthals, for example, built shelters, crafted tools, and created art. Their lives were marked by ingenuity, cooperation, and perhaps even ritual. In their DNA, traces remain in the modern human genome, reminders that humanity carries within it fragments of those who lived long before the Genesis narrative began. Could these ancient peoples have coexisted with the myths of giants and Watchers? Were they the humans whom angels observed, guided, or corrupted in the tales preserved in scripture and legend? Denisovans, known only from fragments of bone and teeth, challenge our imagination further. Their genetic footprint stretches across Asia, hinting at entire populations whose knowledge, culture, and very existence vanished almost entirely. In the silence of their extinction, there lingers the suggestion of a forgotten age, a world alive with beings that modern humans scarcely comprehend, yet whose legacy survives in our own biology. Anthropologists and archaeologists continue to uncover traces of civilizations and artifacts that do not fit neatly into the known timeline of human history. Stone tools of incredible sophistication, megaliths whose construction defies easy explanation, and remnants of settlements in places now submerged suggest that advanced societies may have existed long before recorded history. Could these be remnants of pre-Adamic worlds, the echo of a time when the earth was shared by humans, giants, and the mysterious Watchers? Science, in this sense, does not contradict myth, it complements it. The myths of pre-Adamic beings and the archaeological record may both point to a truth too vast for any single narrative. Humanity, as told in Genesis, may be the culmination of countless generations, the latest expression of life in a world already teeming with intelligence and complexity. Our story begins with Adam, yes, but the soil from which he was formed is ancient, nourished by the countless lives that came before him. To confront the bones of forgotten ages is to realize that history is layered. Myth preserves memory, scripture records revelation, and science uncovers the physical remnants of life that once was. Together they suggest a world that is far older, stranger, and more magnificent than the simple tale of a single first man can convey. In the shadows of these discoveries lies a tantalizing question. If humans walked the earth before Adam, if giants and watchers roamed alongside them, what was the purpose of his creation? Perhaps Adam was not the beginning of life, but the first of a chosen kind, a new covenant with creation designed to succeed where earlier beings had failed. And yet, even as Adam stepped onto the earth, the bones of those who came before him whispered their story, a testament to the forgotten history of humanity. Beyond the bones of early humans and the legends of giants, myths of entire civilizations speak of worlds erased from memory. Atlantis, Lemuria, and other sunken lands are more than fanciful tales. They are whispers of human imagination reaching toward truths too vast to fully grasp. Plato described Atlantis as a civilization of immense power, destroyed in a single cataclysm. Its advanced knowledge, its cities and its culture vanished beneath the waves, leaving only shadows in human memory. Could such stories preserve faint echoes of pre-Adamic civilizations, societies that existed long before Adam, whose knowledge and hubris left indelible marks upon the earth? Lemuria, a mythical continent said to have stretched across the Indian Ocean, is another fragment of this puzzle. In the 19th century, scholars speculated it was the home of an ancient, spiritually advanced humanity, a people who fell to geological disaster. Myths tell of their wisdom, their towers, and their profound understanding of the natural world, knowledge lost to time and the elements. Across cultures, from the Pacific Islands to the Americas, oral traditions describe floods, sunken cities, and cataclysms that erased entire peoples, suggesting a shared memory of civilizations that predated recorded history. Archaeological anomalies deepen the mystery. In South America, stone cities like Pumapunku reveal precise engineering and construction techniques that challenge our understanding of early humans. Across the globe, massive structures are found that seem impossibly old, carved and placed with skill and knowledge, seemingly beyond the supposed capabilities of prehistory. Could these be remnants of pre-Adamic ingenuity, monuments left by civilizations whose names and deeds have been swallowed by time? Cataclysms, floods, fire, earthquakes, and celestial events appear repeatedly in myth and scripture, often as instruments of divine judgment. The biblical flood, the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the deluges described by Hindu, Greek, and Native American traditions, all suggest a recurring theme. Humanity, or the beings that preceded us, was repeatedly tested, punished, or wiped clean to make way for a new order. Adam, then, may have been the inheritor of a world shaped by countless cycles of rise and fall, a steward placed in a history already scarred by knowledge, sin, and catastrophe. These lost civilizations, giants, and cataclysms are not merely curiosities of myth or speculative archaeology. They are threads in a larger tapestry. They suggest that the world before Adam was rich with life, culture, ambition, and failure. They hint at lessons encoded in stone and memory, waiting for those willing to look beyond the surface of Scripture, beyond the accepted narrative of beginnings to perceive a hidden history, a story of humanity before humanity as we know it. To contemplate these lost worlds is to acknowledge the fragility and resilience of life. It is to see Adam not as the absolute beginning, but as a new dawn rising over ancient ruins, a continuation of a story already written in the bones, myths, and ruins of a forgotten age. The earth, it seems, has always been a stage for beginnings and endings, for creation and destruction, for histories that span not centuries but millennia, histories that whisper of what existed before Adam. The world before Adam may be lost to time, but its echoes endure in the myths and memories of humanity. Across continents and millennia, stories of giants, divine teachers, sunken civilizations, and celestial rebellion have survived, not as precise history, but as fragments of memory, crystallized in legend. These tales, whether whispered around fires, inscribed on clay tablets, or carved into temple walls, form a bridge between what was and what is, between pre-Adamic reality and the world Adam inherited. Myth often preserves memory in symbolic form, encoding truths too vast or too complex to be understood literally. The Nephilim, The Watchers, the forgotten kings of Sumer and Egypt. Are they historical beings, spiritual archetypes, or reflections of humanity's earliest attempts to explain its own origins? Perhaps they are all of these things simultaneously, blending memory, imagination, and revelation into stories that transcend time. Even Scripture contains hints of this blurred space. While Genesis recounts Adam's creation, it leaves room for the unknowable. The silence between verses, the gaps in narrative, the unexplained formless and void, all suggest a prehistory beyond human comprehension. Jewish midrash, apocryphal texts, and Islamic traditions fill in these gaps with narratives of angels, jinn, and pre-Adamic worlds, hinting at lessons lost to ordinary memory but preserved for those willing to search. Across cultures, the same motifs reappear: flood and destruction, giants and hybrid beings, knowledge both forbidden and illuminating. The universality of these stories suggests that humanity, even in its earliest ages, carried a shared awareness of pre-Adamic events, a memory of worlds that came before, of mistakes repeated and lessons ignored. The giants, the Watchers, and the lost civilizations may have perished, but their stories live on as cautionary tales, as symbolic truth, as echoes of an ancient reality, too vast to capture fully in words. Memory itself can be a vessel for truth, even when distorted by time or mythologized by culture. In these echoes, we see the fingerprints of pre-Adamic life, the ambition of early beings, the rebellions that shaped history, the civilizations that rose and fell. It is a memory encoded not in books alone, but in the collective consciousness, in the myths passed down across generations, and perhaps even in the bones and artifacts that science uncovers today. To study myth is, in a sense, to study prehistory, not the prehistory recorded in stone and fossil, but the prehistory remembered in the human imagination. It is to trace the contours of forgotten worlds and discern the outlines of beings and events that no longer walk the earth. And in doing so, we glimpse a truth both humbling and profound. Adam did not arise in a vacuum. He inherited a world rich with memory, scarred by ambition, shaped by beings whose stories continue to ripple through time. Between myth and memory lies a space where history and imagination converge, where pre-Adamic worlds live on in the consciousness of humanity. It is a space of wonder, of questions without definitive answers, and of revelations waiting to be uncovered. Here, the story of what existed before Adam is both lost and found, hidden in shadows, yet reflected in every legend, every tale, and every fragment of ancient knowledge that survives the passage of time. To ask what existed before Adam is not merely to inquire about history or myth. It is to probe the spiritual depths of existence itself. Adam, fashioned from dust and imbued with life, represents more than a historical figure. He embodies consciousness, choice, and the beginning of moral responsibility. Yet if beings, civilizations, and worlds existed before him, their purpose may extend beyond the physical, hinting at a spiritual narrative that stretches far deeper than recorded history. Some mystics interpret pre-Adamic worlds as symbolic stages in humanity's spiritual evolution. The giants, the Watchers, the forgotten civilizations. They are not merely literal beings or societies, but reflections of potential. The potential for greatness, for corruption, for learning, and for failure. In this reading, the earth before Adam was alive with lessons, preparing the stage for the first human who would bear responsibility for knowledge, for choice, and for the stewardship of creation. Adam's creation can thus be seen as a spiritual reset, a covenant between God and humanity that transcends the physical. The pre-Adamic world, with its rebellion, giants, and lost civilizations, was a canvas upon which the moral and spiritual lessons of life were first painted. It was a proving ground where ambition and pride, curiosity and knowledge were tested, and where consequences revealed the delicate balance of creation. Adam inherited the legacy of this hidden history, stepping into a world already shaped by the echoes of these lessons. In some mystical traditions, before Adam also represents the latent consciousness of humanity. The first man is not just an individual, but the awakening of self-awareness, morality, and the capacity to choose between good and evil. The pre-Adamic beings and civilizations, then, are symbolic of the untamed forces of existence, raw intelligence, power without wisdom, and knowledge untempered by responsibility. Adam's story is the turning point, the emergence of moral agency from a world that was powerful but unrefined. Even in Scripture, these layers are suggested subtly. The Watchers and the Nephilim are described as mighty and terrifying, yet their legacy is one of corruption and destruction. The earth is described as formless and void before Adam, yet the very phrase suggests prior life, prior events, prior consciousness. In this light, the spiritual meaning of pre-Adamic existence is clear. It is a reminder that creation is layered, and that human life emerges not from nothing, but from the lessons and failures of those who came before. To contemplate the spiritual prehistory of Adam is to confront a profound truth. The story of humanity is more than the tale of a single man. It is the culmination of countless cycles of life, awareness, and consequence, stretching back into times unseen. It teaches that life, knowledge, and morality are intertwined with responsibility, and that the awakening of human consciousness was built upon the echoes of forgotten ages. In this sense, before Adam is not merely a temporal question. It is a question of understanding the spiritual architecture of existence itself, a realm where power and knowledge existed before wisdom, where beings walked before choice, and where the dawn of human consciousness emerged from the lessons of a hidden past. The story of Adam, then, is both beginning and continuation, the inheritor of an ancient, forgotten history whose spiritual resonance still shapes humanity today. For centuries, the question of what existed before Adam has been treated as dangerous, forbidden, or heretical. To ask it is to challenge the accepted narrative of beginnings, to peer beyond the veil of creation into a past that was meant to remain hidden. Across traditions, scholars and mystics alike have whispered of a knowledge that could unsettle faith, disturb authority, and unravel the comforting simplicity of Genesis. And yet, it is precisely this question, the forbidden question, that has drawn humanity to the edge of discovery, imagination, and awe. Why has pre-Adamic history been suppressed or obscured? Some suggest it is to protect humanity from truths too immense to bear. To confront the possibility of civilizations, beings, and worlds before Adam is to confront the fragility of our understanding, the limits of human comprehension, and the vastness of existence itself. Others argue it is a matter of power. To control knowledge of a hidden past is to control perception of creation, morality, and divine authority. The stories of angels, watchers, Nephilim, and lost civilizations have often been buried, censored, or dismissed as myth, leaving only fragments for those bold enough to piece them together. Even in sacred texts, caution and secrecy prevail. Apocryphal books, mystical commentaries, and oral traditions hint at forbidden knowledge, the names of pre-Adamic beings, the deeds of fallen angels, the chronicles of civilizations lost to time. In Islam, the jinn are largely unseen and unspoken of, their history overlapping humanity's but concealed from ordinary understanding. In Judaism, Lilith and other pre-Adamic entities exist mostly in marginal texts, their stories fragmented, their power veiled. And in Christianity, the Nephilim and Watchers are mentioned only briefly, leaving centuries of speculation in their wake. Yet it is precisely the forbidden nature of this knowledge that lends it power. The question, what existed before Adam, forces us to confront uncomfortable possibilities. That humanity is not the first of creation, that the world is older and more complex than Scripture alone reveals, that knowledge and power may have existed before wisdom and responsibility. It is a question that challenges assumptions and compels us to reconcile myth, science, and theology in a single uneasy vision of history. To ask the forbidden question is to step into a realm of shadows and echoes, where certainty dissolves and imagination must guide the way. It is to acknowledge that pre-Adamic worlds may have existed, worlds of brilliance and corruption, of ambition and collapse, of beings who walked, ruled, and fell long before humanity's first breath. And in doing so, we recognize that the story of Adam is not the absolute beginning, but a continuation, a turning point, a renewal built upon lessons written in the ruins of what came before. The forbidden question reminds us that knowledge has limits, that some truths are hidden, and that curiosity is both a blessing and a peril. And yet, it is through this very curiosity that we begin to piece together the forgotten history of humanity, tracing the shadows of pre-Adamic worlds, the echoes of giants, angels, and civilizations lost to time. It is a path both thrilling and humbling, leading us ever closer to the truths that lie beyond memory and myth, waiting to be discovered. As we trace the shadows of history, the whispers of myth, and the bones of forgotten ages, a single truth emerges. The story of humanity is far older, stranger, and more complex than the tale of Adam alone suggests. Before the first man, there may have been civilizations, giants, fallen angels, and beings whose wisdom and power shaped the world in ways we can scarcely comprehend. These pre-Adamic ages, whether literal or symbolic, remind us that existence is layered, that time is vast, and that our beginnings may have been built upon ruins older than memory itself. Yet even as we peer into this hidden past, certainty remains elusive. Atlantis and Lemuria, the Watchers and the Nephilim, the Jinn and pre-Adamic humans, all are fragments of a reality that defies simple understanding. They exist at the edge of history, where science meets myth, where archaeology meets legend, and where the human imagination reaches for truths too immense for any one narrative to contain. And perhaps that is the point. The story of what existed before Adam is not merely a question of fact, but a question of perspective, of wonder, of our capacity to imagine the vastness of creation. Adam in this vision is both beginning and continuation. He is the inheritor of a world already alive with history, already shaped by triumph and failure, by power and rebellion, by knowledge and consequence. His story does not erase what came before. It rises upon it, a new dawn over ancient shadows. And in that dawn we glimpse a profound lesson. Humanity is not isolated, not original in the simplest sense, but part of a continuum, a lineage of life, consciousness, and experience stretching far beyond what we see. To contemplate the pre-Adamic world is to embrace mystery, to accept that some questions may never be fully answered, and to marvel at the depth and complexity of existence. It is to recognize that what came before Adam was a tapestry of life, intelligence, and story, some of it lost, some of it remembered, and all of it influencing the world into which he stepped. The unknown remains, as vast and infinite as time itself. Beneath the soil, in the bones, in the ruins and the myths, lie traces of civilizations that may never fully be understood. Beyond the veil of scripture and legend, angels and giants, jinn and forgotten kings, the echoes of pre-Adamic worlds still call to the curious, the daring, and the seekers of truth. And so, we are left at the edge of imagination, looking back into a past that is tantalizing, terrifying, and magnificent. We cannot know everything, yet we can acknowledge the possibility that humanity's story did not begin with Adam, but continues a much older saga, written in the shadows of history and the whispers of myth. To ask what existed before Adam is to step toward the unknown, and in that step we honor the forgotten ages, the lessons of rebellion and creation, and the enduring mystery of life itself. For even in the absence of certainty, the story calls to us, inviting us to imagine, to explore, and to wonder at the hidden history of humanity. A history that, like the stars themselves, stretches far beyond the dawn of the first man.